Morning at NTV.
Welcome back to Morning at NTV. I still do have the Director of Physical Planning at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. That's none other than Mr. Biendaimira Vincent. He's still here with me in studio. Mr. Vincent, yes, we are still having a chat on physical planning. Give us a time frame on all these physical planning and urban development projects, especially in the new cities.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Sonia. You will allow me to do the new cities and a few other maybe places where we have got planning projects currently going on. Starting with what we call the Uganda Support to Municipal Infrastructure Development, USMID project, which has been in municipalities in this country. It started in 14 municipalities, has expanded now to 22 municipalities. And this includes all but one, I think, of the cities. That is one of the cities, I think, is not one of the Nakasongola is not one of those cities. So the rest are so in that project. So that project is a World Bank project, about $360 million US. It has helped and is still helping these municipalities and now some of them cities to do their planning. Most of them, if not all, already had plans, what we call overall plans, if I may call them. Sometimes we used to call them structure plans, you call them physical development plans, but suffice it for me to call them overall plans. So most of them have those plans, but of course these ones which have become cities, most of them have expanded now and they will require now new plans. So for the other ones which do not require new plans, they are now doing what we call detailed plans, because when we do a plan, we start with a big structure. We say for Kampala, these are the main roads, these are the main areas where we will have residences, these are the main areas we shall have industries. And then the detailed ones, we zoom in and we say, okay, in this residential area, these are the sizes of the plots, the sizes of smaller roads and things like that. And so that is what is happening in the other places. And this project is on, I think, now 2.5 years, and we still has another 2.5 years for it to end.
And efforts in KCCA is physical planning?
Yes, although if you allow me to finish on the cities. Now, on the cities, we expect that government is in the process of coming up with the development partners, in most cases, coming up with a specific program to deal with the planning in the cities, because these are bigger places and they have got now different aspirations, so we have to do some other planning. That should happen in another 1 year or so. In KCCA, yes, as the biggest city, if you may, people call it the sitting room of this country. There is planning intervention. The last plan, I think, was approved in 2014, if I remember well. It has not been very effectively implemented. We have got now support from JICA as a country to the Japanese and a Japanese organization to support us in reviewing the plan within Kampala and within the greater Kampala area. So we expect that in another 1.5 years or 2, we will have a brand new plan to details, even to, in some areas, to designs of some of the infrastructure projects that will be identified under that planning intervention. So if we come here in another 2 years, we might be talking different things in as far as planning of KCCA is concerned. And beyond KCCA also in the greater Kampala area. Now, even beyond the greater Kampala area, we have got another planning intervention which is happening. We called it Jinja Kampala Mpigi corridor. As you notice, that is that corridor perhaps has got the biggest density of economic activities, if I may, in the country, and a lot of other event transport and things like that. So we picked it as a prime corridor that required very good planning and organization. And with funding from the Africa Development Bank, from the Korean government actually, through the Africa Development Bank, that planning commenced. And right now I think they are on situation. They have finalized the situation analysis, and we expect in another half a year, maximum 1 year, we should have a plan for that whole corridor, which also encompasses the whole of Greater Kampala metropolitan area. So in greater, well, maybe metropolitan area, I should say just Greater Kampala, because the metropolitan area of Kampala is not yet formal, I think, in the country's formal documents, but the Greater Kampala. So with that planning intervention, we certainly expect that we should see more order where most people would like to have their activities, and that should be helpful.
Well, speaking of order, Mr. Vincent, saving the best for last, what needs to be done to improve the physical planning situation in Uganda?
Quite a bit needs to be done. I think first and foremost, as a country, we need to invest, and this is, I think, at the highest level of this country, the people who make decisions in this country, we need to invest in physical planning by all means, more investment. I think I should say we should, for us who are in physical planning, we should be grateful to government that now some resources are flowing to spatial planning, to physical planning, but much more investment needs to be done in this area. There is not a single country in this world that developed that did not deal with its physical planning. None. If you look at all these countries that have China, which have been growing very fast, Malaysia, Singapore, especially Singapore, because Singapore was at our level not many years ago, then they organized their country. The whole country is planned to the detail. Now, that planning is what will stimulate development. A country that is not organized can say bye-bye to development. You cannot expect, because it controls almost everything. If you are talking about investment, people want to see, are you organized? If they put their investment here, is it okay? Is it not? So there is that investment that is required by the state, by the country in physical planning. We need to more and more people to understand, to appreciate physical planning. Yeah, it looks like you're running out of time.
And we do appreciate Mr. Patrick Biendaimira, Mr. Vincent, yes. Vincent Biendaimira, ladies and gentlemen, he is the Director of Physical Planning at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. Many thanks for having made the time to speak to NTV. At NTV, my name is Romeo Busiku. Well, we are going to be talking about the issue of collapsing buildings in the country. Before we went for a break, I did mention that 2020 alone, we've had 4 buildings collapse. Yes, January, April, May and September. The recent one happening over the weekend in Lukuli, Makindye. Well, recent developments relating to collapsing buildings have brought back to mind the need for physical planning in our country. Some have argued that the communities should be set up organically. Yes, while others prefer deliberate designs. Now, to share with us this and more, we do have Vincent Biendaimira. He's the Director of Physical Planning at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. He joins me right now in studio. A very good morning, sir.
Good morning, and good morning, viewers.
Yes, as someone who is in charge of physical planning in the country, let us in on the situation of physical planning in Uganda.
Yeah, thank you very much, Romeo. I would say this physical planning situation in Uganda in the last few years has improved. We are still not yet there, but we have improved quite a bit. For example, when I had just started working back then in government, physical planning was not understood or known by anyone. We have so far, this far improved, appreciation of physical planning. There has been a lot of, campaigning and, so that right now many people understand. If we went to cabinet, maybe 95% of cabinet members, if not 100, would understand what physical planning is and its value. We are right now preparing we are at the tail end really of the first National Physical Development Plan for Uganda. This is the first, you can imagine, since Uganda was, and it comes with a lot of certain expectations. We recently amended the law that governs physical planning in this country, the Physical Planning Act. With a lot of improvements. It creates now offenses and very deterrent, measures to deal with them. It creates a board now which is independent of the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, which should be able to dispense. It also strengthens the relationship between the ministry and other players, including the police, and hopefully we will see that relationship bearing fruits in terms of improvement of enforcement of physical planning and such others. So there has been quite a lot of improvement. But of course there are still issues as far as the planning situation is concerned. We still see quite a bit of slums and some of them are expanding. That's a challenge that we certainly have to be looking at. And quite a number of towns coming up and not as they ought to be. But those are issues that we are looking at, and we are expecting that we should be able to improve the situation further.
Of course, Mr. Biendaimira, you mentioned that the state of physical planning in the country is improving, but then according to some analysts, they might beg to differ. Because since 2006, we've had nearly 20 buildings collapse in the country. Mr. Vincent, what could be the problem?
Let me start by, Romeo, by saying actually collapse of structures is not necessarily a physical planning issue.
Indeed.
Collapse of a structure is because of its lack of integrity, maybe, of that structure, if I may say.
Right.
Physical planning is a spatial discipline. In physical planning, we determine where things should be. Of course, if we determined that we should have 50-floor structures in areas that would not hold such structures, we might be partially to blame. But of course, when an engineer comes to design the structure, they should be able to see that, and they can put in place
if you say don't build in a swamp and an engineer goes ahead to do it, it's on them.
Yeah, but even then they should be able to design a structure that can withstand the conditions of a swamp. So I think the situation has been, we have not had up to now, we have not had very good control of buildings up to now. But fortunately, I mean, I'm also on the board of the National Building Review, the National Building Review Board, which actually is responsible now for structures, to make sure that structures are constructed the way they should be, are good for habitation, will not collapse tomorrow. And so I know that there are so many measures that are being put in place to make sure that structures will be what they are supposed to be. And we should see maybe, and even these collapsing ones, if I may, yesterday there was not so much action after maybe a structure had collapsed. But now, as soon as a structure has collapsed, there's a team at it investigating, and we make sure that they get to the bottom of the reasons why the structure might have collapsed.
Can you bring us up to speed with the recent developments on what really happened in Lukuli when the building went down? What information do you have?
I'm sorry, I'm not like straight on the team that dealt with that one. I think one of these days you would want to interview the executive secretary of the National Building Review Board. She would have much more information. But I am aware.
We did before, and she assured us Uganda wouldn't ever suffer an issue of collapsing buildings, because she assured us measures were being put in place. But then we've continued to see buildings collapse left, right, and center. And many people would wonder, are you satisfied with how local authorities are handling or implementing physical planning systems that you offer them?
Yeah, you almost have two questions in one. First, on the other one, I think the executive secretary was certainly right. Measures are being put in place. Now, being put in place means we are in the transition. We still have a lot of structures. Now, maybe the structures that are being constructed now onwards might be more compliant. But there are, of course, so many other structures that have been in place already which may not be nicely compliant. There have been processes that we have gone through already, structures that are starting to be constructed, but were not controlled as much as. But that will certainly come with time. We should be.
So let me get this straight. The measures are sufficient enough. The problem is adherence to the same measures.
Yes, that is correct. Right. And putting in place the structures, they are supposed to be, for example, committees at the local government levels dealing with these, but these are just starting. I'm sure when all is in place, we should be able to see.
And the local government authorities, are you satisfied with the way they are implementing
plans,
the physical planning?
Yeah, you might say yes and no. There are local governments that are very good at their job. They make sure that when a plan is done, of course we start with a plan, because some local governments might not have a plan. As you know, we have very many town councils that have come up recently. A lot of these might not have plans. I know we are supposed to have plans at every district level. Many districts, most districts don't yet have plans. These plans cost a bit of money and they take a bit of time to be put in place. So we begin from there. Now, once a local government has got a plan, the issue is implementing it. Now, what do they need to implement? They need, of course, resources. Unfortunately, some of them may not have these resources. For example, when you do a plan, the biggest maybe you need to open up roads in order for you now, because this is the structure of a place. It is made up of roads mostly and other such linear structures. So in order for you to open them up, you need to survey, you need maybe to compensate for the land and all that kind of thing. So many towns still have a problem with resources to do that. But I also know that there are quite a number of them which are implementing their plans very well. Yes.
Yes.
And we could give examples.
And is it the local governments that deliver the physical plans for their area, or is it you who delivers them?
Physical planning is a decentralized service, so the local governments, yes, but with our support, because we put in place the legal framework, the policy framework. We also support, we give technical support to these institutions, but otherwise they are responsible for their own places to plan them and to ensure that they implement the plans.
And let's talk about the new cities. Are they a blessing or a curse for physical planning?
They should be a blessing, the new cities.
How?
Yeah, you see, the cities are at a higher level, and the expectation is that they should attract better resources. As I said earlier on, resources are really a big function in as far as implementation of plans, planning and implementation of plans is concerned. So yes, just by virtue of that status, we expect that they should attract a little more resources from government, but they can also attract resources from development partners. As you may know, in KCCA here, you can see we have got a number of now roads being constructed. Many of these are funded by the World Bank. We also have some World Bank, we have a lot of World Bank presence in municipalities, and including these ones which have been elevated to cities. But we expect that now that each of these cities might have its own, you know, thrust forward with the development partners, and we might expect more resources as a result. But also, we expect more personnel, for example. The structure for the personnel structure of these places are coming up. Human resource is a big function in effectiveness of activities in any place. So when you have got more, for example, in physical planning, currently in the municipalities you have 1 or 2 personnel people. But in the cities we might have 10, we might have more than 10. Now you can expect that with that we should see you know, better planning, better implementation of plans.
And also, Vincent, do you believe in a planned system or an organic growth where community needs determine how we evolve?
No, organic never. Because human beings, we are all potential. I mean, we are all selfish. All human beings, including you, Romy, and myself.
Go ahead.
It's the levels that some of us maybe are less, you know, selfish than others. So if you let people do things according to their liking, certainly they are going to do things that will not be to the neighbor's liking.
That's why we need a structure.
Yeah, we need to plan. We need certainly to plan all places so that we do not let places just sprout out as they wish. And you can see where that has happened. We do not have order. We do not have. You would not wish to live there. You want to live in a place which is organized, where everything is predeterminable. Like if I'm constructing here, my neighborhood has not constructed yet, I know that even when they start constructing, these are the kinds of things I expect there. Rather than for you to do your bungalow here and then tomorrow they put maybe something that you do not want to see next to your gate. Yeah.
So what are the cons of a community organic growth? Disadvantages?
Yeah. I have just mentioned a few of them. Let me, I will maybe answer it better with some examples. If you just allow, but of course, let me maybe differentiate between community-led organization and just
for the viewer.
Because community-led organization, you can have planning which is community-led. And so it's not so much organic, but there is some order that is created by the community deliberately. That is okay. But, and indeed when you talk of a community, then you are really talking about people talking. And once people start talking, then you are talking about planning actually.
Indeed.
So only it is the level of planning and the approach. But if we look at just letting things happen organically, because organically really is by the way everybody feels, the disadvantages would be that you are going to have maybe very narrow roads where there should be wide roads. You are going to have blind spots because people will construct all the way and they will not leave spaces where you might be able to see where you are going. You are going to have maybe people's toilets in front of people's, you are going to have maybe a bar in front of a church. You are going, you know, those kinds of things which are incompatible uses. You want to have compatibility when you are talking about settlements where people would enjoy such settlements. Yeah.
And of course, another issue that is really important is the oil and gas industry, which is one of the most important developments in Uganda.
That's right.
Well, how is physical planning been helpful to the oil and gas industry?
Oh, thank you. We certainly have been, just like many other government ministries and entities. If I commence from the very beginning of the oil and gas industry, when Uganda confirmed those commercial quantities of oil and gas, there was a drive towards coming up with a policy so that we are not like many other countries that just went into exploiting the oil and gas without preparing for that. So we had an oil and gas policy which we participated and made sure that physical planning is taken care of. So physical planning under that policy is supposed to ensure that there is order in the areas where oil and gas activities are happening and any other places that might be created as a result. And we followed that quickly with the declaration of a special planning area in the Albertine Graben. The Physical Planning Act gives the the National Physical Planning Board the authority to declare special planning areas. And when a special planning area is declared, everything else may be put to a halt until planning is done. So that was done, and the plan was prepared. I think completed in 2014 or thereabout, with a number of proposals that would make sure that this place develops as it should, does not in a haphazard manner, and we are able to tap the resources there. There are so many other resources apart from oil and gas that we do not have incompatibilities between the different industries operating in that area. And following that, we have come down and prepared lower level plans. We have prepared, for example, Noya District Physical Development Plan, Kikube District Physical Development Plan, Hoima District Physical Development Plan, Kabarole and Bunyangabu, and those are now at a lower level and have gone even lower than the districts and prepared a number of urban physical development plans, and also for some growth centers, especially those that are close to where a lot of activities are taking place or are slated to take place sooner than later, like around Kabale, where we have the refinery, and in Bulisa, where we have got other processing facilities, and so we are active actually in the oil industry and doing what we ought to do.
And I'm sure it has not been a rosy road, Mr. Vincent. What challenges have you encountered along the way?
Oh yeah, it has not been. Of course, in Uganda now, land belongs to the people, as you know, which is okay. But unfortunately, many citizens don't quite differentiate between land belonging to them and the need for them to use that land in a way that is, beneficial to themselves, but also to the country, to the rest, to their neighbors and everyone. So many landowners do not quite appreciate the need for, controlling their use of land, or, guiding. Let me say, perhaps control is not the best word. For guiding their use of land. Because when we come in, we're like, okay, this area, we would not expect, for example, residential structures here. And guys are like, no, for us, we want to construct. And so you have to explain, you have to engage them, a lot of engagement. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge, that people think that once I own this land, I must use it the way I want. Which
and
is,
the cost implications?
Yes, certainly planning can be quite costly, because it is an engaging exercise. In order for you to finalize a plan, you must engage from the, the best would be reach every individual who has got a stake in that area, who has got a piece of land, who has got a house there, who lives there, who, you want to, now, by the time you do that, it is quite some money. You also need to pick data, spatial data, the latest information, and sometimes that also can be costly. And so that's the challenge. But also, after the plans have been prepared, now that is perhaps even a bigger challenge. Than the local governments have got these plans, but they might not implement them as they should be. And I think that is our biggest battle right now, to make sure that the plans that are being prepared in this country are actually implemented. Yeah.
Do you envisage a situation where the oil and gas industry might pose an imbalance economically? Because in the Albertine Graben region, we might notice increased development than other regions within the country. as a physical planner, do you envisage a situation where this takes center stage in the near future?
No, not at all. I don't envisage that. You see, oil and gas will bring resources to this country, and this country is a planning country. We have, of course, to plan. When we plan, then we are able to. It's just that the graben will make a huge contribution to the coffers of this country, and it is up to the country to decide how to deploy the coffers. Actually, it is an opportunity to even ensure that there is equity, there is equitable distribution of investment or investment by government all over the country. Because now, if we have the resources coming from there, you can ensure that there are irrigation scheme, for example, in Karamoja, if that is the decision that is taken in the planning of this country, and you can see development there much more than you would see, because we will have the resources to do that. So no, I don't see that, because this right now it might look like the Albertine Graben is getting a lion's share. Why? Because you need infrastructure, you need things to be in place in order for you to be able to produce this oil. But once it is produced, then the money is come to the coffers of the country, and it is up to the country to see how to utilize it. And it would really be an opportunity for us to be able to use, because we have enough now, more or less, to deal with whatever challenges, development challenges we might have anywhere in the country.
Of course, environmental protection cannot get lost in this conversation. As the Director of Physical Planning at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, have you put in place some measures to protect our environment as we proceed with oil production?
Yes, sure, Romeo, we have.
Such as?
Yeah. First of all, let me say, when we are planning, a physical development plan has got all the, you are looking at the economy, you are looking at the social part of it, you are looking at the environment part of it when you are producing a physical development plan. So all those facets are looked at when a plan is being prepared. So first, for example, you will not see a plan which is which declares, you find there is a forest reserve and you are proposing maybe a city development in the forest reserve.
Indeed.
A few times there might be need for reorganization of the spatial area, but in most cases you will. So while we are doing planning, we certainly will identify the areas that require protection, for example, environmentally sensitive areas. If you look at the National Physical Development Plan, we have got these ones very well identified in the whole country now at that scale. And even when we come to a lower scale like a district and a town, we still identify the environmentally sensitive areas. That is a big theme in the preparation of any plan, and we have done that. So once you have identified them, you are able to protect them. If you must have, say, infrastructure going through them, again, there are processes in this country through environment impact assessments to determine how to have a road, but at the same time mitigate the environmental issues that we might suffer, the country might suffer as a result of this road. The same thing even in the oil and gas industry. I know that before we commenced, there were lots of preparations. There was this environmental atlas that was prepared, which identified all those places that are sensitive. And as planning happens, you already have this atlas, you know this area, and you deal with it. And if you still must have some development around it, you must have mitigation measures to make sure that you do not cause unnecessary issues.
All right, Mr. Vincent, away from oil and gas, let's talk a little bit about climate change, flooding. When the skies open up, yes, the picture being painted within the city and the surrounding environs and other places within the country paints a wanting picture of physical planning. And so many people argue that the situation we find ourselves in is because of poor planning or insufficient physical planning. Where do you stand here?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to start defending my area here.
I see.
But I may say that, for example, when you see floods and things in places, it is a function of many things. And many times, actually, physical planning is the farthest. It's not even, because planning may have happened nicely. Now, why do we flood? It may be because areas that receive water have been eaten up.
Poor drainage systems and so forth.
Yeah. Now, when you talk of poor drainage system, that's an engineering function. For me, as a physical planner, I will show you where I expect maybe infrastructure. For example, roads, they tend to be roads, you tend to have drains along roads, but you can also have independent drains and stuff like that. And you expect that the engineering function would take it up, design effectively, and make sure that water is evacuated. But of course, physical planning, if we fail to protect, for example, wetlands, because these are the areas which where most of this water finds itself before it finds itself into maybe the water systems, then we have a contributing factor there. But as I said, it's many. I think as a country, it is high time we started ensuring that there is compliance in everything. Most times it is poor compliance or lack of it, of things, of plans, of engineering designs, of even when the drains are there, the common person will throw. I see every day people throwing these bottles out of their cars. If it was some ordinary small person just tipping a bottle, yes, but from Mercedes-Benzes, from all sorts of vehicles, and you have seen lately pictures where you have